sounds like a story to me, some crazy fable that you would not believe. Oh, but ain't she...
Welcome to the Avram Davidson universe, where we listen to some of the greatest stories ever written, adored by Ursula Le Guin, Neil Gaiman, Leonard Nimoy, Ray Bradbury, and Stephen King. Enjoy classic tales such as Are All the Seas with Oysters, The Golem, Sources of the Nile, and many others. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Avram Davidson Universe podcast. Today we are going to be listening to Pebble in Time, which was originally written in F&SF in August of 1970, I should say published. Our guest today is a good friend of mine, Kory Christensen, who is an aspiring writer who recently completed 3 novels of speculative fiction set in the San Francisco Bay Area. His current project is a historical fiction novel which takes place in Renaissance Italy. I've had a chance to read at least his first trilogy, and it is absolutely fantastic. I know he's in the process of looking at agents. Anyone would be incredibly lucky to have him. So if anyone is looking for a new amazing writer, you would be very lucky to land Kory. He should be on any moment. In the meantime, in terms of what's going on in the Avram Davidson Universe podcast, always looking for new guests. So if you're interested, you don't have to be an aspiring writer or an author. You just have to love talking about Avram Davidson stories. So you can reach me at avramdavidson.com and just put contact there, and it will automatically come to me. So with that, I will be bringing on Kory any moment. Kory, it's so good to see you.
Thanks, Seth. It's great to be here.
I love your background. Tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, as you know, I have a little bit of unusual background. My day job is fairly busy. I'm a patent attorney at a large national firm with over 1,000 lawyers. So that keeps me pretty busy and limits my writing to pretty much the weekends and at night.
And what do you have back there? It looks like globes and spyglasses and maps.
Yeah, I have a lot of interesting artifacts. I mean, one thing I got, which I don't know if you can see this, the patent office used to require that you had to submit an actual working model of every new idea. And so this is actually a pipe cleaner from the 1840s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
oh my gosh.
I have it along with the original patent certificate, which is kind of fun.
Well, going into your background, I mean, I was fortunate enough that you were able to, and I appreciate it, share one of your early novels with me, which I absolutely loved, and obviously you've used your expertise in some of your writing. What do you tell us a little bit before we get into Avram? Tell us a little bit about some of the work you've done and some of the things you're currently working on.
Absolutely. So I love science fiction and fantasy. It's been sort of a passion of mine since I was very young. I'm particularly interested in books that deal with what it means to be human. You know, I love stories that talk about free will and determinism, betrayal and redemption, love and loss. And I particularly enjoy the classic Greek myths like Psyche and Eros. And so that sort of set the stage for my venture into fiction writing about 5 years ago, where I wrote a trilogy, which I call Psyche's Ocean, the name of the trilogy, which sort of scratches all of the itches that I have for things that I enjoy. And it's been an absolute pleasure to write, and it got me sort of on this path, and I don't imagine I'm going to stop doing it now. But, you know, just in a nutshell, what the trilogy is about is it deals with the idea of, you know, one of the things that we most take for granted in our lives is that the person that we are right now will be the same when we wake up tomorrow. And it occurred to me, well, what if that wasn't the case? You know, that what if, you know, tomorrow we are not the same person? And there's already ways this can happen. I mean, through injury, or there's certain common drugs that can actually change your personality. And it got me thinking about what we could potentially explore with in a science fiction setting with intentionally seeking after a change in personality. For example, imagine you could take a pill and become as extroverted as Oprah Winfrey, or as cool under pressure as Michael Jordan. And I think a lot of people would sign up for that. And my first novel, Psyche's Rising, explores a world in near future San Francisco where a pharmaceutical company launches a new drug that shifts personality and allows people to become the kind of individual they want to be. And of course, there's a lot of unexpected consequences of doing that. But that's what I talk about in the book.
Well, and again, thank you for letting me read it. It is one of my all-time favorite novels out there, so I can't wait to see it out on the shelves, hopefully at some point in the near future.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And what are you working on now?
So I'm taking a little bit of a detour. I've also been interested in historical fiction. I think that Avram and I share that passion. Earlier in the year, I went to Florence to sort of immerse myself in the city and the culture and the sort of the ambiance, as it were. And I'm working on a historical fiction novel set in Renaissance Florence. So that's been a real pleasure to write, and I'm about halfway done, and hopefully I'll finish it up sometime next year.
I can't wait to see it and read it. Well, it's a good segue into Avram. I know you and I met a few years ago, and I believe I'm the one who actually introduced you to him, but or maybe not. But tell me a little bit about what you've read of his so far, or what in particular you've really enjoyed of Avram's before we get into the story.
Sure. I think I probably had read a little bit of Avram before, but after we met, I got into him quite a bit more, and I just absolutely love his writing. It really sort of in many ways is how I would like to write. His tone, his style is just very interesting, and I've tried to emulate him a little bit in my own writing. I just absolutely love it. But among his books that I really enjoy, I love the Virgil Magus series, which begins with Phoenix in the Mirror, of course.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorites. I also really enjoy the collection that this story, A Pebble in Time, comes from, the other 19th century. It really fits in sort of with my aesthetic, and I absolutely enjoy the idea of sort of high technology that might have existed in the past, and how certain individuals might have come upon something that we don't even have today.
That's great. Well, I think it's a perfect segue right into the story. What do you think?
Absolutely, let's go for it.
All right, let's do this.
Pebble in Time with Cynthia Goldstone. The city of San Francisco is certainly my city. I wouldn't live anywhere else than the Port of Zion for anything in the world. Perhaps my favorite worldly spot, next, of course, to Golden Gate Park, is the Embarcadero. Only two people have ever known how much thanks is due to one of them, now passed from time into eternity, that the sailors and seafarers have helped spread the restored gospel throughout the seven seas to the four corners of the earth. Of course, its spread was inevitable, but I do think that if we saints had stayed in, say, Missouri, our message would have been much slower in making its way around the world. Not that I mean for a moment to indicate anything but the most wholehearted approval for the work done by our regularly appointed young missionaries. But of course, nothing can equal the zeal and energy of sailors. And walking down the Embarcadero and seeing the vigor with which they toss their orange Julius drinks down their thirsty throats, I think how different the scene must be in, for example, that terribly overgrown and misnamed large city in Southern California, where seafarers may be seen abusing their systems by the use of alcohol, tobacco, tea, and coffee. All, of course, forbidden by the word of wisdom of the prophet Joseph. When I speak of the role played in this by one of the only two people who know the whole, true story, I am referring to my maternal grandfather. I am the other. And I suppose I'm a chip off the old block, or, perhaps stated more exactly, a chip off the stalwart old Mormon family tree, so well set up, on paper of course, by Grandpa Spence during the later years of his retirement. How he spent the earlier days we will see very shortly. As is usual among LDS people, I take a great interest in my ancestors, but most of all in Grandpa Spence. It may be because I inherited, if such things be hereditary, both his interests in genealogy and inventions, as well as that slight speech impediment which becomes troublesome only at moments of excitement. I have always said to myself, Nephi Spence Nilsson, your grandfather rose above this, and so will you. It invariably helps. Grandpa was aware of all that, and it constituted another bond between us. To sum it up, he and I both tended to stammer. Both were interested in Mormon history and genealogy. Both loved to consider mechanical devices. It was a combination of these characteristics of Grandpa's which brought about a certain incident, which I feel can now safely, and should now, properly be made known to one and all. And above and beyond that, my grandfather specifically, though in veiled language, asked me in his will to speak out on this matter at this particular time. Grandpa was a peach. Perhaps it was the very enthusiasm of his devotion to the Latter-day Saints, though Grandma drew the line when he dutifully considered taking a second wife, which accounted for his unfailing good humor and zest, even when he was quite old. Needless to say that he was a respected and responsible citizen, having for many years been mechanical supervisor for the various industries operated by the Latter-day Saints Church, and was valued for his circumspection as well as for his technical competence. Unfortunately, or fortunately, let history decide, his circumspection failed him at one crucial point in his life when, but let me simply state the facts. Grandpa had left England with a party of immigrants, all converts like himself, as an already full-grown young man of 15, crossed the plains to Great Salt Lake City, and within a short time was hired by President Brigham Young to copy letters in his clear and graceful longhand. His promotion in the church was rapid, and after 50 years of remarkable service, he retired to his own 3-story home on First North Street. Grandma had passed from time into eternity years before, and all the children had homes of their own. A neighbor lady acted as part-time housekeeper, leaving him free to follow his own inclinations, in his own now fully free time. The inspiration for the chief of these inclinations arose out of the only real regret that he had ever had. Much more out of his reverence for Mormon history than personal pride, he wished so much that he had not missed by only a year or so having been present on that great day when Brother Brigham led the weary pioneers to the bluff overlooking the great Utah Valley and announced that they would stay and make the desert bloom like a rose. In his retirement, Grandpa Spence secretly determined to build a device which would transport him back to that decisive moment. "I was born in the age of the covered wagon," he declared to himself, "and have lived to see the age of the flying machine. Eternity is one thing, but time is another, and surely to a saint nothing is impossible." He was, of course, not certain of being able to return. He might even be scalped by an unconverted Lamanite, but to these considerations he gave but a shrug and a smile. His enormous dedication to the idea of fulfilling himself in this singular way enabled him to work like a steam engine. He had helped drive the Golden Spike at Promontory Point, Utah, incidentally. He was a vigorous man with great inventive ability, and he was inspired. He completed the machine one bright May morning and got to Observation Bluff 1 hour and 17 minutes before Brother Brigham and his advance party arrived. Grandpa had not calculated on finding a smooth and barely downy chin instead of the full beard his hand automatically sought to stroke in satisfaction. But after a moment he realized what had happened. He had traveled back in time so successfully that he had become a stripling once again. Fortunately, he had always been moderate in diet, and his 20th century clothes were only slightly loose. Unfortunately, he no longer had the gravity and patience of his former years, and soon became over-anxious and restless. And as the pilgrim travelers approached, his excitement drew him away from the machine, which was well hidden by the bushes on the bluff above the new arrivals. He was recklessly determined to get as close as possible to the principles of this historic moment, and to hear the historic words, "This is the place." And in moving towards the travel-worn saints, creeping along in the low bushes, he accidentally dislodged a stone, which tumbled down the slide, gaining momentum. Forgetful of all else, he stood up to warn them out of the way, but in his excitement he found his speech impediment rendered him unable to release a sound. The stone rolled and bounced and hit Brigham just above the worn and dusty boot on his right leg. The square, heavy face winced and swung around and saw the still speechless stranger above on the bluff. All the weariness and travel of the long journey west, all the tragedy of the Mormon martyrdom, all the outrage of the persecuted was in Brigham's roar of pain and astonishment. "Look ye there!" he cried. "Who's that? Not a speck of dust on him, throwing stones already. I thought this place was empty, and I see that the Gentiles have got here before us." And while poor young again Spence struggled vainly to give utterance, regret, and denial, Brigham turned and swung his arm in a great, determined arc. "This is not the place," he cried. "Onward!" Not for a moment did anyone dream of controverting the word of the president, prophet, revelator, and seer. "Onward!" they echoed, and onward they went. And the conscience-stricken young stranger, where did he go? Well, where could he go? He went after them. Onward, of course. Of course, they couldn't make heads or tails of his stammering explanations, nor even of the ones he attempted to write, but they understood that he was sorry. That was enough. Mormons have suffered too much to be vindictive. And that night, when the band camped, he was brought to the leader's wagon, where a small lamp burned. "Young man," said Brigham, "they tell me that you have expressed a seemly contrition for having raised your hand against the Lord's anointed. Therefore, I forgive you in the name of Israel's God. They also say you write a good, clear hand. Sit down. There's pen and ink and paper. Dear Sister Simpson, it cannot have escaped your attention that I have observed with approbation the modesty of your demeanor, equally with your devotion to the doctrines and covenants of the Latter-day Saints, which is of far greater importance than the many charms with which a benign nature has adorned your youthful person. My advanced years will always assure you of mature advice, and in my other 17 or 19? Pshaw, boy! A man can't keep all these figures in his head. My other 18 wives, you will find a set of loving sisters. Since it is fitting that we be sealed for time and eternity, kindly commence packing now in order to depart with the next party of saints heading for our original destination, which, as you know, was tentatively the peninsula called San Francisco in Upper California. Yours and etc. B. Young Pres. Church of J.C. of LDS. Send it well, son, for I hate a blotty document. You've all read your history, and must certainly have often felt thankful that Brother Brigham did not yield to the momentary impulse he admitted he had, and that he did not stop in Utah. Despite its impressive name, Great Salt Lake City is just a tiny town with a pleasant enough view, but even that can't compare with the one from my window alone. It's a pleasant thing to sit here in my apartment atop the hill on St. Street, sipping a tall, cool lemonade, and admire the view. To the west is the great span of Brigham Young Bridge across the Golden Gate, with its great towers and 7 lanes of cars. To the east is the Tabernacle, its otherworldly shape gracing the marina green, with the stately temple nearby. I see a network of wide, dignified streets feathered with light green trees, giving the city the look of a great park. And being truly a Mormon city, it is undisfigured by a single liquor saloon, tea room, tobacconist, or coffee house. And Grandpa? After his retirement, he sold his house on Joseph Smith Esplanade and moved to the fine apartment in the St. Ashbury district, where I now live. Having decided to leave well enough alone the second time round, he devoted his last years entirely to the study of Latter-day Saint genealogy. He felt right at home here, as do I, and why not? After all, the St. Ashbury can boast of more lemonade and postum stands per square block than any place in the USA, and one is always seeing and hearing those inspiring and exciting initials LDS, LDS, LDS. Afterward to Pebble in Time. Cynthia Goldstone is a highly regarded San Francisco artist. Ray Bradbury once wrote her a letter of appreciation. Cynthia and her late husband, artist Lou Goldstone, exhibited their work at many science fiction conventions and were a much-loved couple in the Bay Area science fiction community. Avram and the Goldstones were good friends in San Francisco during the lively 1960s and 1970s, before Avram relocated to Washington State. Cynthia has always been fond of her Mormon heritage. I can imagine the fun Cynthia and Avram had writing this story, perhaps while passing around a pitcher of lemonade. Grania Davis.
So what'd you think?
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite short stories.
What resonated with you? What stood out?
Well, one of my favorite television series on Netflix is Dark. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that, but it involves the discovery of time travel in the 19th century. And it sort of involves a number of families over time. And there's a little bit of kind of a similar vibe with a Pebble in Time that I really enjoy. And coincidentally, one of the main characters in Dark is actually goes by the name of Nielsen, so like the narrator.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
I think for me, what really struck me, and it was funny as heck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the story is really funny, and I don't think Avram was taking it too seriously, and yet it could easily be made into a very serious story, or it could keep its sense of humor. It's sort of I found it could go kind of either way.
Yeah, the humor is absolutely one of the things I enjoyed the most. And if there's any way, if it was ever adapted, I hope that humor can stay through, even though it could there's definitely some heavy material that could be included. But I mean, for me, one of the things I really enjoy is sort of the historical what ifs. What if something changed? And, in this case, Brigham Young doesn't stop in Salt Lake, but continues onward to San Francisco. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Orson Scott Card's Past Watch, where he explores what would happen if Christopher Columbus didn't make his voyage and all the ramifications of that. So, and I think you know this, but Orson and I both have something in common, and we're both raised Mormon. So this story absolutely resonated with me. And had I not known that he was writing it in collaboration with Cynthia Goldstone, I would wonder, if he wasn't Mormon himself, because he definitely hit every nail. I mean, it was all the Mormonisms, as I call them, all the phraseology is perfect. It's just, he has it down perfectly. Yeah.
Well, in terms of it, the story itself historically, do you know, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, it sounds like maybe Brigham originally wasn't planning on going to Salt Lake. How do you know if that was specifically where they planned to go, or if they planned to go to San Francisco, or kind of how that worked?
Yeah. So some people actually did go to San Francisco in advance, like Sam Brannan, and he became quite wealthy by selling to the 49ers, and became one of the most wealthy men in San Francisco. But Brigham Young, I think, probably intended to go to Utah. I mean, there was a lot of discussion beforehand of where they were going to go. But what it all kind of centers around was that he thought he saw in vision where he was going. And so when he went out to the observation bluff and looked over the valley, he saw it, and it sort of resonated with him, the vision that he had. And he said, yes, this is the right place, and that's where we're going to stop.
And in terms of, if this had actually happened, the idea of the capital of the Mormon religion being San Francisco, often talks a little bit about sailors and how that might have actually helped accelerate and spread the Mormon faith even further. I thought that was sort of fascinating.
It really is. And I don't think this is too far off of a possibility because, had Brigham Young come into the valley and found settlers already there, I mean, they were trying to escape persecution when they left Illinois. And, had they found people already living there, I think they would have continued onward, maybe into Nevada or possibly all the way to California.
Wow. Well, in terms of talking about adaptations, how would you, if you were going to adapt this into a film or a TV series, any thoughts come to mind?
Well, one of the things that the book, I think, the story intentionally does is that doesn't go into a lot of the detail on the technology, like how did he find out how to do this, and that's great for a short story. It's just perfect. But I think if this is going to be an adaptation, you'd want to explore that a little bit more. Like maybe, there was somebody else that helped him, or that he had some kind of preliminary discovery that led to the development of this device. I would probably want to explore that a bit more. But also, I think this is just a fascinating time to discuss. I mean, this is during the time of Mormon polygamy. And, they talk about how, he, was grudgingly going to, take a second wife, but grandma nixed that. I'd love to see more discussion of that, in the story. But it's just it was a really kind of interesting time. The Wild West was just in the process of being tamed, and all of the sort of things that were going on with the Mormon church at the time would be just absolutely fascinating.
I think there's so much room to expand this story into all the different facets and details of the Mormon religion as well as the characters. I also thought I think it's going back into the adaptation, but also the story itself. I don't know if I've seen this before, where when you travel back in time, you become younger.
Right. That was somewhat unique, and I really enjoyed that because that sort of makes sense. I mean, obviously, it would limit your ability to go back too far.
Correct.
In this case, you're able to work out that he basically must have been born in the 1830s to make the timing work out, so that when he was youthened, he would be in the right age range. But yeah, it's really fascinating. I could totally see him as or Grandpa Spence as Andrew Garfield, with him sort of maybe youthened a little bit as the young man, and then aged to be the older man.
Well, it's funny looking at characters. I did an online search, and I said, who would play the original pioneers of the Mormon religion? And for Brigham Young, interestingly enough, John Goodman was listed as the perfect person to cast as Brigham Young. I don't know if that would fit, but I thought that was fascinating to actually find someone had already taken the time to list the different actors who would play different founders of the Mormon religion.
Well, that's fascinating. There was a story, a movie about Brigham Young in the 1940s, and I know Joseph Smith was played by Vincent Price.
Yep, I saw that.
Interesting choice. I sort of envisioned for Brigham Young in this case, Ethan Hawke, maybe just put on a little bit of weight, give him a nice neck beard. I think he'd be a good Brigham Young.
That's hilarious. That's great. I think he would be. Anything else to add to this, add about the story or other thoughts?
Well, there's just so much. I mean, it's, the humor and the Mormon phraseology just really gets me. And one of the things I really like is the when at the end of his life, or at the end of Nephi's life, he's talking about living in the St. Ashbury district with more lemonade and postum stands per square block than any place in the USA. Well, that sounds great. And the fact that the sailors in San Francisco all drink Orange Julius, which is actually pretty close to the truth. I mean, in Utah, they have this thing. I don't know if they have it in the Bay Area, but everybody drinks sugary drinks. There's like actual stores where you buy these drinks that are like 10 times the sugar of normal drinks, and you mix them up with different flavors, and it's a real thing in Utah. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I don't know here. I was just thinking about the hate, I forget what they called it, the hate Ashbury, but the LDS instead of LSD. And I recall specifically walking down the hate growing up and people offering me LSD, like
Yeah.
literal LSD. And so clearly they knew that as well, which is
Yeah, that was a
pretty funny.
hilarious play. In fact, that's sort of reminiscent of the, Star Trek 4, where McCoy says, I think he did, or I think it was Spock that said he did a little bit too much LDS in college, or I don't know if you remember
Oh, that's
that
right.
joke.
Oh
They were
my
in San
gosh, yeah.
Francisco at the time, yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah, I never thought of the parallel.
Actually, it was Kirk who said that. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, before I can't thank you enough. I think this was such a fun story, and I'm so glad you were able to join me. Anything else you want to add?
No, I absolutely enjoyed it, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you. We'll definitely be in touch.
Sounds great.
I suppose God only knows. It sounds like a story to me, some crazy fable that you would not believe.